So this next session, I've got an amazing panel joining me for it, and I'm going to try and shut up for most of it. And we're going to take a look at brands. And really, we're going to have a think about how do we ensure our brands are resilient? How do we ensure that they thrive? How can we cut through some of the noise? So we've got quite a challenge in the noisy environment we've got. Let me ask the panel to introduce themselves, first of all. So we'll do that. They know themselves better than I know them. And then I'll mention who I am in case you don't know me, and then we're going to kick off. Please think about questions you have. So I hope there is going to be time to come out to you. If you have an urgent question as we go through, stick your hand up, and we'll take a detour and take some questions. We don't care. We'll do this without a safety net. So is that all right, by the way? We didn't rehearse that bit. So please do think about questions. But let's first of all introduce, and we're going to start that end.
Just, I'm first, am I on?
Because you
okay.
just assumed we were going to start this end, you see. Keep you on your toes.
Ladies first and whatnot.
So, Heather.
Yeah, I am Heather Hurd. I am the Senior Director of Global Content Studio for FIS, which is a really large fintech company. We have a global presence and the fun challenge of doing marketing for a solution that we can't show anyone. I mean, there's nothing to touch, so...
Secret marketing. I love it.
Marketing.
I love it. Gintare.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gintare Budriunaite, and I work for Carrier. Usually, I look after strategy for fire and security businesses and look after the product management and marketing teams. So pretty broad role.
Very good. Thank you. And Richard.
Hi everyone, I'm Rich. I look after brand and marketing at AMEX GBT, which is a global travel company for businesses. I look after a series of things from brand and awareness activity globally, as well as marketing communications as well.
Very good. And for those of you who haven't met before, I'm Simon Edward, former CMO and VP at IBM and various other bits and pieces now, but another time if you want to know more. So let's dive in. You can tell the questions are about to start because I sit down. Did you notice that? Did you notice the choreography that we've done here? It's amazing, isn't it? Absolutely no investment in it at all here. So look, I think having introduced yourselves, let's kick off. What are the recent or current trends and market changes that have impacted your business? How have they impacted it? What are you doing about it in terms of what's happening? Because we spent all morning hearing about these changes. So what are you actually doing about it?
I'm sure it's going to shock everyone when I say AI. Yeah, so I think for us, and like many of us, I think we are really focusing on, there's no getting around it. It's not going anywhere. So how do we find ways that we can leverage it where it works well? How do we find ways to bring our teams into it in a way that they feel really bought in and not threatened by what they perceive as the risk involved? And then how do we make sure that we are making room to sort of experiment with it, play around with it, stay on top of it, at the same time that we're trying to manage our day-to-day business bandwidth. We're all super busy. So I think that's definitely what we are most struggling with or focused on right now. And so far, I'm very lucky to have a really fantastic team that's really open-minded about it and ready to kind of play around and see what they can do. So far, we're doing all right, but that's definitely at the top of mind for us.
Well, we have a few, but maybe I'll focus on one of them, just mentioned the other ones. Digitization in general is affecting every area that I look after, starting from how we design our products, how we interact with our products, the same as well from our services that we provide, as well as tapping into how we speak and how we communicate with our customers. This might seem very simple. It touches, you could think only marketing communications, but really when I look at it, if we are not talking about how our customers interact with our products, from marketing communications, product marketing, lead generation becomes very difficult. And Carrier and same companies as Carrier, our competitors, we're hardware businesses, so and we're B2B hardware businesses. Very difficult usually to come to the end user, but digitization allows us to do this, and this really has changed and is changing of how we will interact in the future. So that's one of them. Of course, there is a shortage of skilled labor, and when I talk about skilled labor, I talk across the board, but specifically for us, we heavily reliant on installers, and so that also changes of how we actually talk to people who are actually maintaining, installing our systems, and what methods we choose to bring in on board. And another one, of course, urbanization. And urbanization is not stopping. A lot of people moving to the cities. So we have to actually think about how that growth is going to be generated moving forward and what role we have to play in it. So maybe just those three. There's a few more that are important, but maybe those are most interesting ones.
Thank you for sharing the one thing that is really stressing you out. It's great to hear that. So Richard, what's it like in your world?
I'll try and pick one. So as I mentioned in my intro, we're a B2B company. Therefore, as many B2B companies, incredibly commercial. We're the world's biggest B2B travel company. And as a result of that, a lot of the activity that we do is very measured, incredibly commercial and very focused on data. One of the challenges I have with my team is making sure we get the balance right between creative storytelling and measurement. And I think that's really important in large B2B brands. It's important in all brands, but it's also important we focus on things being interesting, entertaining, God forbid, humorous. And actually, we tell some stories in a way that help people to know that we understand them. I think that's hard when you want to invest significantly in storytelling. Entertaining creative is expensive. Fantastic agencies are not cheap, and therefore you really want to attract those excellent storytellers for your brand. I don't think that means it shouldn't be measured, but of course it is a long-term measurement play when brand building. And in a commercial business, that's a challenge. So, we're trying to address that through a number of things, such as balancing a good balance of performance and brand marketing. I quote Burnett and Field to my C-suite on a daily basis, but I think one of the important parts of that is making sure we don't lose focus on the commercial part of the business, but we do accept that there is some risk and therefore opportunity in investing for the long term with brand building and storytelling.
Okay, thank you. So I recognise all four of those. I think about workload, digitalisation, skills shortages, and balancing that creative. There's certainly things that resonate with me, having spent a lot of time in the B2B space. The other thing that I noticed is thinking about your businesses that you're each in, very competitive, lots of noise, lots of stuff going on, lots of things demanding attention. What do you do on that side of things so that you can cut through? If you call it differentiation if you want to, but how do you cut through and actually start having the conversations with people in the businesses, maybe end users at times, that you want to actually get their attention?
I think for us it really comes back to something that Richard touched on, which is all around storytelling. The point for us is that we have to tell the right story. It has to be authentic to who we are as a business. It has to really align with the values that we've set forth and that we want to be carrying out into the world. But at the same time, it also has to take into account a very complicated market, a lot of regulatory compliance on our side, a lot of huge changes in the way that our clients are thinking about their own businesses and the things that they're looking for, the things that they're willing to spend their money on. So it's really a sort of a complicated look at what should be something very simple of telling the right story to really sort of engage everyone in a way that feels really authentic, because I think audiences now are really so much more savvy and so much faster to see through when you're just, wheeling out the wheelbarrow of marketing jargon. So
that certainly sounds a good thing. Just before we move on, once upon a time, there was an audience that came back from lunch. And how many of that audience told stories in their businesses in order to cut through to their clients? Now you can put your hand up if you use storytelling in your organisation. Not bad. I'd say probably about 60%. So thank you for that. The others may be using storytelling and they've just had a very good lunch and they're having a little nap now. But very interesting. So lots of people recognise the storytelling. So what about you two in terms of cutting through the competition? What are you up to?
Couldn't agree more than with what Heather said. But I would say that companies' vision and purpose should not be shaken by the noise, right? So we probably all agree on that. And the only thing that I could add is that internal conversations, they're very good at actually what does that mean to us? If you're hearing the noise or you're hearing your competition doing something different, even topics like AI, we heard about IoT and all other big buzzwords, right? You have to bring them back inside and have that conversation, really, what does it mean to us? And usually that does not change of really what your company stands for. It might change your strategy here and there, but it really shouldn't change of who you are and what you set out to be.
Yeah, I agree. I agree a lot with that. I think for us in particular, I think the idea with my team is to think about how we identify those real brand truths for us, and how are we different? How are we unique, and what makes us the best? Caveat from a legal perspective, obviously, depending on the market. But how do we stand out? For us as a travel management company, for businesses, ultimately, they've been around a very long time. For many of you in the room who've worked for large businesses, you probably have booked travel through AMEX GBT. A lot of people do. But actually, it's a very service-based business. We have about 20,000 people, and about 3/4 of those are travel counselors and agents. But actually, as we continue to grow in less corporate spaces, but smaller businesses, we really need to not only digitize the business, but be able to talk about the benefits we give to small businesses. It's very competitive. Comparison sites are all over the place. I'm sure you've all booked holidays in the last few months. And the process of booking a holiday is very similar to how you book business travel. You search for hotels and flights and prices. And you're trying to build some sort of business case to your boss around why you should do that business trip at a low cost. The benefit actually for our business is normally in the disruption. So actually, of course, we have more travel options than any other business. We're the third biggest travel booker in the world behind Expedia and Booking.com. So we have all of the content for you to book. But so do loads of other people, right? So how do you sell that to people is challenging. The reality is, if any of you have ever been stuck in an airport, or you've turned up at a hotel and there's an issue with your reservation, you'll probably remember the awful experience you went through to get in touch with an airline on the phone, or try and sort out something from a hotel reservation line. By having a travel management company, that takes all of that away. You've got a central service that delivers all of those things. This isn't a sales pitch, but the idea of it is that disruption,
I'm feeling I'm not going to get off the stage here.
That negative part is actually one of the benefits. And so for us, I think that's a differentiator and a human truth, but also a challenge, because you can't run an advertising and marketing strategy based on when things go wrong, we're the best people to have by your side. And so I think you have got to play into those human truths. You've got to be really honest and open with people. But I also think you've got to use customer case studies and testimonials in a way that helps people to see themselves in your shoes.
So talking of travel, little known fact, and I'm not going to say which person up here. So one person up here has travelled internationally. One person up here had a slight problem in terms of travel, because the certain item that the person was travelling on got cancelled, and that person had to book a hotel, new travel, transport, and everything else. So you think somebody on this stage would have helped her, wouldn't you? No, just left her alone.
Wait
After
a minute.
all of that claim, just left her alone, no help at all. So anyway, no, enough of that.
We can talk after about that.
Yeah, I say talk after. I would have thought you would have helped her out. I don't know. After all of that. Right, enough of that. My beef coming out there. So listen, on all of the stuff you're doing in differentiating and staying true to purpose that you spoke about, one thing you can't get away from is that we all have clients. They may not be consumers as such. Maybe for AMEX, for instance, you may be somebody else, maybe booking the travel for an executive. But you all have clients. So how do you integrate the insights? How do you integrate the voice of clients? Where does that fit in all of the dialogue and discussions within your business in terms of thinking about the brand and differentiation and cut through? How does that fit in? Maybe we'll go to, and I apologize, I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, aren't I? You say it, because you're really good at saying it. Go on.
I've been abroad for long enough. I've heard all the versions.
But I'm going to learn it, because I keep calling you Gintare.
Gintare.
Gintare. Okay, I'm going to learn it because it's appalling. I can't say it. Gintare. Why don't we start with you?
Okay, so my goodness, my favorite topic, understanding competition, understanding my client needs. It feeds into almost every process that we do. The only question is, how do we as a company pull it all together and make sense of it, right? And at what points we do what. It goes from voice of the customer to silent observations to annual surveys that we all do to our NPS desirable scores that we want to have, right? The only question is, how do you then aggregate it and make it actually usable for yourselves? And I think there are certain points, natural points for a company every single year, like strategic exercises. This is where you can really pull all the functions and test out actually what we have done and what have we heard. But there's also monthly pulse checks, right? And it's for a company to decide of how they do it. One of the successful ways for us to do it is to actually aggregate a small report out of how our competitors or our customers doing, and get that feedback. And that involves not only the sales, who have an immediate touch point almost every day, let's say, but it involves all the other functions like marketing, or as we say, order placing people, right, and so on. So you involve the whole charade of people to provide that feedback. And it's not at one point potentially, but throughout the month you have a way of gathering it, and then one person helping to aggregate it and push it out to everybody as a quick report to read. It has been very, very helpful, and educating your full team pays. Really, it really pays because you're educating your full staff of why it's important and what's happening, so you don't have to do one by one job or do a catch up for somebody of what space you're at all playing in, because you're not just pushing out an email or you're not just building one little gadget. You have to understand the space you play in and what we're trying to achieve.
Gintare, before we move on there, did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes.
I'm learning. Did everyone buy into it, or was it a real hustle, if you like, in terms of trying to get different business units or lines of business or functions to buy in? Everyone bought in?
Everybody buys into it. The only question that people ask, who's going to aggregate it?
Because
I don't want to aggregate.
Does that fall to marketing? Normally, if nobody wants it, it comes to marketing. Let's face it. We end up with everything that's kind of.
In my case, marketing is very happy to do it because we then feed into marketing is I would say, especially product management with product marketing. It's probably the hardest jobs in a company from my perspective, because you're managing people without any positional power most of the time. So I'm happy it ends up there, because then we have to influence people and then we have to push out that's relevant into the market space again. So.
And it gives a great seat at the boardroom table. I used to have, as well as CMO, I was the client experience leader. And honestly, the client experience piece often gave me the strongest seat at the boardroom. So it is really powerful. Heather, what's happening in your world around this side of things? We go back to the question, which is really around that insights and client voice and how you can integrate it to make sure that your brand is out there, differentiated, visible, attractive, all those things that go with it.
Yeah, I think we're taking a really similar approach, honestly, in terms of a really collaborative approach that's involving insight from our sales team, insight from our customer service teams, and really bringing everyone together to be really gathering, because it's easy from a marketing standpoint to reach out and look for that great client story, and we certainly do that as well. But there are so many data points that we miss when we don't involve everyone in it, and so really just taking that super collaborative approach across everyone that touches the client in any way, and then moving forward from that with a strategy that is 100% client focused across the board. We now have a client experience team specifically whose largest goal is to aggregate all of that data, to gather it, to get that information, to be out there in front of the client in every possible way. So that has been really helpful for us. And then, of course, for marketing in particular, turning it around back into, and I'm probably going to say storytelling 40 more times, but turning it back into the right stories. So taking all of that data, figuring out what to do with it, and turning it back around in a way that allows us to bring ourselves back into market in a way that resonates.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. We have different groups of customers, as many businesses do. For our large corporate clients, we do a lot of face-to-face interactions. I try and do those quite regularly with our biggest clients, and normally without the sales or account management person there, which makes them feel incredibly uncomfortable. But also means you do get genuine, honest feedback. And I think that that is not only, I'm not suggesting the salesperson is changing the feedback, but actually often the client will be more open when they feel they're talking to a marketing person, I think. So that works really well for us. On the smaller business side, we do a couple of different things. We do classic NPS kind of engagement stuff, but also we use the creative measurement of our performance marketing and content marketing as a way to indicate how the people feel about the marketing activity, and therefore how they feel about the brand. So are they finding content that we produce very interesting? Are they spending time looking at that on the website? Are they interacting with us in different ways? Are they sharing that content? All, I guess, cues and signs of advocacy, which I think are very important in the way you measure effectiveness of your brand. The NPS work is fantastic. It's clearly been around for a long time, and it's a good way of, I think, celebrating when things are going well, or using it as a sledgehammer when things aren't. But often, in my experience of where I am now at GBT, as well as previously in financial services, it can take a while to make things happen, and it kind of just feels a little bit like a scorecard metric. And so I do think it's important to have creative optimization and use that as a way to measure engagement with clients, as well as some of those bigger metrics like NPS and CSAT as well.
Do all three of you use NPS? Is that the score? Does everybody use NPS? Who doesn't? That's a shame. Name and shame here. Anyone not use NPS as a score? Anyone not know what NPS is? You don't know what NPS? So Net Promoter Score. It came from Bain, wasn't it? Bain put together the original methodology. And surprise for anyone that can explain the methodology here? No? You give a score out of 10, and effectively you look at people who are detractors and people who are recommenders, you take the passives out in the middle, one away from the other, and it gives you a single numeric score. And what you're looking for is how likely is somebody to recommend you. It comes down to really a single question. Often more questions are asked. It's interesting. Go on.
I was just going to touch on NPS.
Please
I think
correct me.
No,
I've probably got it wrong.
I'm not going to. No, that is completely right. But I think that's the point around kind of psychology of people, right? How often do people say they're going to do something versus actually do it? And that's why I think NPS is an important measure, not only because we're an independent company that licensed a brand off American Express that requires us to have NPS, and we provide that in many ways. But I do think people saying they're going to recommend someone versus actually recommending them or sharing their content or engaging with your brand is very, very different. And I think in B2B businesses, we all make, I think there was a few of us in the Trustpilot session earlier, we were talking about making recommendations on personal purchases. And worst case scenario, you buy something that's a bit rubbish based on a rating online. Well, you've lost a bit of money, but it doesn't really matter. In B2B, if you buy something that is not good, you could lose your job. All right, or you could have a significant issue with your day-to-day job. And so I do think it's important that you measure people's actual advocacy and what them sharing things or actually speaking to people rather than just saying, yes, I would, but I haven't.
Sorry, I forgot to lift up the mic then. It's too complicated, trying to do two things at once here. Gintare, you actually used a word which I quite like. We're staying on NPS for a second here as we're on it, but you used a word, and that word I think goes beyond the measure. You used the word actionable. So you said actionable, and that I think is really important because NPS does give you a score, but it also gives you a reason to go back and talk to somebody. Maybe they had a great time, in which case that's fantastic. Maybe they had a bad time, in which case, hey, it wasn't what we planned. How can we make it better? So I think actionable is really, really important in terms of how we use that information. And then many other organizations of the business can use it as a reason to go back and have that discussion. Now, I want to move on to the killer question. So last night I said that we were going to look at this one. And actually, I was thinking about this morning. I popped some stuff in my car. I looked back at the really ugly hotel that we're in and thought, we've got this ultra-modern hotel in the amazing grounds and with the history of Syon Park. But we've got both. And then I walked in and I saw the snacks. And I looked at the snacks and I thought, we've got these amazing looking flapjacks and all sorts of sweet sugary things which look delicious. And there's also actually a lovely colourful bowl of fruit. So I was looking at it going, okay, so it's kind of, we've got these two things together. And then I was thinking about this killer question we've got here. We've got brands. We probably need to be true to the core. But is there room for innovation as well? So can you innovate as well as staying true to your core brand, or is it actually the core brand has to go and innovation needs to take the brand to the next step? So this is the killer question, I think, in terms of this. It's just the warm up until now, by the way. So what do you think?
This is my favorite question.
Go on then. Dive in first. I'm guessing the answer is storytelling, by the way. It's everywhere.
So storytelling. No, I think for us, the approach really is that the right approach to brand identity and setting up your brand and carrying out your brand allows for that ability to stay agile with the way that you go forward with it. And so the right setup of your brand is making space for innovation. It's making it possible to innovate. You're still keeping that core, like Gintare, I think you said, you're still keeping that core of who you are and what your values are and what matters the most to you, but that doesn't preclude innovation. So really, I think if you're coming at it from the right perspective, they work well together and they build on each other. So as you innovate, you may iterate a bit on your brand. It may shift some of the specifics of how you take your brand out into the world, but it's not going to change who you are. It's not going to change the basics of what your brand is about.
And when you dive in and drive innovation, do you expect it to come internally, or do you go out externally? How do you actually drive innovation? Because some organisations there are lots of new people in it. Other organisations are quite staid in terms of it, or I should say they have consistent. They have low attrition, maybe a positive thing. But effectively, how do you drive that innovation if it's so important?
I think in a lot of cases, it's about creating spaces where people feel comfortable failing, giving everyone in the organization the opportunity to have their voice heard, and knowing that when they bring forward a new idea or come up with some amazing innovation, that they're really going to be listened to and taken quite seriously, and then giving them the opportunity where possible to try those things out. And if they fail, they fail. And we've learned like a really important lesson from what might have gone poorly, or we've come up with an opportunity where we're launching an innovation based on something internal. And so not only does that make space for that innovation, but it also makes your team feel really bought into what you're innovating on. It makes them feel much more ownership over the work that they do every day. And so it helps, I think, quite a bit with keeping the right people in the seats as well.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm going to jump to Richard now, only because Gintare was assuming we were going to her. We don't want to be predictable, do we? So Richard, what about in AMEX?
I think innovation is a huge word, and actually often can seem quite scary. Monumental business change, huge new product, etc. Something Heather mentioned, I think, is really important. That for me, it's about testing, trying new things, doing it in an iterative way, and being prepared to make changes quickly if things don't go as planned. And that can be anything from creative testing to trying a new positioning element of your product or service. But I do think the personality of the brand is exactly like the personality of a person. Imagine your best friend, you turned up next weekend and you went to meet them for dinner and they were just completely different to the person they were before. You would feel quite uncomfortable and you would think, what is going on? This person's, had a personality transplant. I don't think innovation should feel like that. And I often think businesses, especially service-based businesses or older businesses, dive after a really big shiny thing and almost alienate their existing customers in the desire to get new customers. So for me, from a brand perspective, you have to be prepared to evolve and change, and also acknowledge that brand really isn't owned by the brand or marketing team. We set the guide rails and we do the communications, but certainly in B2B, the thousands of people who are speaking to our customers every single day, they're the people who are the brand, and they're the people who are talking about the brand. So if you make too many changes and you change your direction too much, then they feel like they don't know what's going on, they become inconsistent, and the best messaging and advertising you do ever isn't going to paper over those cracks.
My wife had that challenge, by the way. She met somebody, had a really nice conversation with them, absolutely fabulous, and then she was out and she met them again. And they were a right stinker. This woman was a right, and she was like, blimey, what's happened here? Personality change, completely gone, couldn't believe it. And
she innovated.
It was a bit of innovation. She was talking to somebody else, and they turned around and said, you met her twin sister. And,
oh, wow.
Literally, the twin sister was such a mare. And one of them was nice, and one of them clearly didn't get the niceness gene. But she was completely thrown, and she thought she was talking to the same person. It's like, rather than saying, oh, that's my twin you met, they're like, oh, no, that was that. Yeah, my wife was not happy when she came home, but it came out later that it was a twin. Unbelievable. So, Gintare, we'll come to you next.
Well, a lot of good comments already, but the initial question was quite shocking to me. Because if your brand...
I can't remember the initial question, it was so long ago.
If your brand limits your innovation, we've got a problem, right? So that means something has done a very bad job, or your R&D team or your other teams have gone completely 360, right? From manufacturing something, one thing may be going to a completely different space, right? From lollipop making into fire detector making, something drastic, right? So I think a brand should not restrict your innovation at all. And in fact, every business, you think, okay, there is a business that wants to grow and find ways of growing, right? So you would say you have your core technology or your core business, and you innovate around that core. Of course, when there is an owner of the business who says we want to expand through M&A, then you look at your options, and if the owner goes to completely different, let's say, field of M&A, you say, do we need to fit this under one brand? And you solve that problem in a very logical way. Should it be together or should it be apart? That's the way I would answer. But then for innovation, innovation comes in many ways. Internal innovation is easy and hard. It depends on what setup you have. If you have a very old business that has grown through many acquisitions and had to be squeezed into a certain setup, you have to set up the hubs, as Heather was talking about, and you have to elevate it from the, let's say, really non-visible space into a very visible space so that your leadership looks at it. You get actually really good traction and very good energy within the team, high visibility, and the innovation starts to happen. And you have to give them a bit of a leeway to explore, fail, try again and then hopefully eventually succeed. And that all rests on the budgeting as well. So if the company is willing to pay. Another way is, of course, M&A. It's another way of doing growth, and a lot of companies take that approach, and that's where the brands get challenged, and you have to put your heads together what you're going to do with the branding, and that's where real interesting things happen in terms of what choices you make.
And M&A often allows you to accelerate it. So if you know what the brand stands for, you know the identity, M&A can allow you to accelerate it. Maybe you can't go and acquire talent. Maybe there's a limited pool. Maybe it's access to a new market. Maybe it's particular skills. So it's a great way to accelerate it. I've worked with a number of organisations who have spoken about enduring purpose. So the business has an enduring purpose. They're clear about what they do, and then effectively the brand supports that. So it feeds in very nicely to what you were saying there in terms of the fact that actually you should be able to do innovation and brand. You should be able to walk and chew gum in terms, if we were talking about this at lunchtime, in terms of doing it. Now we're going to pause there for a second because it's over to you. Now, who was going first out here? What questions have we got? There must be some couple of questions out there. This is quite important. It's packed in here. Look at it. Standing room only. Those who got seats came in early. You've got the expensive seats down here. No questions? None at all. Nobody wants to know anything. God, the lunch was good.
No, it's just
that's fine.
We've been so informative.
We've
covered every
so
possible
informative,
question.
or we're really dull. One or the other. I'll take the informative one. I think it's great.
Think positive.
Yes, no, I'm having a good time up here in terms of doing it. So I had a question for you just before we dive on to the next thing here, which is, do you all go direct to clients, or do you have like channel involved? Are there any third parties involved in what you do? Especially thinking about how you carry your brand through, how you keep that identity going when maybe you're working through talking to other people. I mean, it's difficult enough with our own employees when they're being paid by the company, but do any of you work with through a channel or through another party where you have to carry your brand through someone else and try and keep it whole when it lands in front of the end, if you like, business that is buying from you?
Yeah, we do. We operate in about 140 countries, and about 120 of those are through partners. And so,
do you want to name them all?
I would love to. I can't even name the 20 that aren't. But yeah, the 120 that aren't, a lot of the engagement with them is around brand governance. So of course, you want to make sure they use the brand and represent the brand in the right way. But ultimately, the biggest challenge I think in those spaces is localization of the brand. And I think that's where we have to really, really challenge ourselves to think differently about how our personality shows up in those different environments. And we work really closely with all of those markets on that basis, both from a marketing perspective, but also from a sales and client engagement perspective. It is really, really important that, certainly from a business travel perspective, what people want in the US, which is a very common business travel environment where people fly continuously and have a very different view to air, versus people in mainland Europe who are doing very different things and see, rail as an ever-growing travel method in terms of sustainability and various other elements. So we have to be very careful about how we pitch our partnerships with suppliers, as well as how we show up in those markets. I don't think there's a cookie-cutter approach to that. I think it's just about making sure you have people in those markets who really understand those markets and can spend time with you evolving what you want to stand for. And then I think that's the key to how we operate anyway. Okay.
What about Gintare? Do you have a challenge there with working through other people, or are you all direct in terms of the way your business works?
No, we actually, and in general, fire and security business works through the installers and distributors. So we have to actually think about how we will appear to our immediate customer and then an end user. So what we do usually, because we work with so many installers, they have a limited budget. So we have to actually really think about how to help them. It's usually not how do I help my salesperson. That's, of course, I do that. But the next step is what promotional activities, what materials do I provide, and how do I bring all of my channel closer to me and make them richer and their salespeople richer, to enable them to actually do a better sale for me, right? So it's thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So we have to have a good structure to.
That's a huge challenge, and it's almost like a franchise business. It's a massive challenge to have it. And how's it going, by the way?
It's challenging. You think at a corporate level, at a higher level, you have everything in control, and then you get down to the region, and then you actually regionalize things, and things happen at a regional level that you not always see. But it's a good challenge, and we continue trying to improve.
It's impressive. Heather, what about in your business? Is it third parties or is it all direct?
A little both for us as well. And I think definitely like the localization aspect of it is a huge part of it that is probably the biggest challenge for us in terms of sort of maintaining brand integrity and maintaining sort of our messaging and who we are and how we approach the world. And yeah, I think to Richard's point, the same thing, you know, really knowing that we have people on the ground in those places that are equally immersed in what those local regions really want and need to see and the ways that we need to make adjustments to make sure that we are really reaching them in the way that we intend to, but who are also really steeped in who we are as a brand so that they can sort of, it's almost like having someone translate a document for you. You can directly translate it, and you'll get something that likely mostly makes sense, but has some really odd turns of phrase or strange sayings or things that don't read well to someone who's a native speaker. Or you can have someone translate the intent, the spirit of the document, and then you end up with something that's really usable. So I really think that's kind of the approach that we try to take, is just making sure that we are working with people who can carry our brand for the spirit of our brand forward.
And that's a great analogy in terms of thinking it through, in terms of what we do. So look, we're nearly at time. So just as we wrap up here, maybe there's one example in terms of your own personal brand rather than business brand where you've implemented a change. So a quick fire one here. You think of it quickly, Richard. I can see you there. I can see it click, 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 click. We won't come to you first then. But maybe something you've done for your own personal brand in terms of investing or doing or changing that you'd like to share.
Sure. So maybe a little over a year ago, I started posting really regularly on LinkedIn, which was a huge change for me. It was something that I didn't totally understand the value of, I don't think. And I think also was a little bit of a not feeling like I had things worth saying. And then I just sort of started talking about everything that's on my mind. Turns out I have a lot of thoughts. And it has paid off incredibly well for me. So lots of network building, lots of connection making that has been really useful and part of why I'm sitting right here.
Fantastic. Gintare.
That's very lovely. I aspire to that. For me, really, over the last couple of years, what I've done and what I've heard actually previously in one of the sessions was for me to figure out what my values were. I've never really questioned it. I've never really thought about it. And going through that exercise has really helped me to become really strong in what I am and why I do certain things and what's important, and also understand where some of my values are actually don't work very well together, and certain things happen. So I think for that helped me to shape of who I am and be a bit more stronger in what I actually bring to workplace, and understand the value of what I bring. So I think that really has helped me. Very good.
Richard, did you have time to think about it?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, good.
So two things I think.
You can see the way I helped you there.
Two things.
Can you give me a cheap holiday now?
I definitely will. I'll get you some flights. I think there's two things for me. So number one, I didn't go down a traditional educational route, and so I found a lot of my early career benefit through mentors and coaching and support. And about 4 years ago, I really started investing in that. So not only does it mean I can give back a lot of support for young people who are early in their career and kind of not really sure where to go, either pre or post university, but also for me, it allowed me to speak at some certain events and do coaching and various other things. So that was the first thing. The second thing is continuing on Tony's conversation last night at dinner, which was I started finding out more about the Data and Marketing Association, the DMA. About 4 years ago, it is by far the industry's best kept secret. Tony mentioned it last night as well. There is a huge amount of opportunity there for anyone who is really interested in learning about different channels, different ways of thinking. And that really helped me to unlock various different opportunities, meet lots of great people, network, and various other things. So if you haven't done that, little plug for them, have a look at that. Just be curious, I guess. None of us have free time to look at our own personal brands, right? We're all very, very busy at work. And then when we're not busy at work, we're busy at home. And so I really do think it is worth trying to find that time, find whatever works well for you. I personally found it quite challenging on many occasions, but I do think you've got to try and carve out that time. And there's a lot of opportunity out there to go after.
Very good. I agree. By the way, I have time. Okay, I have time. I'm trying to change my life. So you said none of us have time. Okay. I know one person. I have a bit more time. So here we are. So
you could give us some of your time.
You can have some of my time. Anyone who slept through this session, okay? Anyone who slept through the session, This session covered workload, digitization, skill shortages, balanced creativity with storytelling, vision and purpose, brand truths. We spoke about the client voice, the client experience. In fact, it's a team game. It has to be actionable. It has to be face-to-face and honest at times, and NPS is a good tool. Brand identity is really important. We need to be comfortable with failing. We need to have the voice heard. And at the same time, with an enduring purpose, we need consistent reach through the channel. And then we need to make sure if we look after our brands, and you might want to do all of this, posting regularly, clarity of values, mentors and coaching, and be curious. And apparently, nobody has time, but I'll add to it and say I claim my life back. So thank you very much to my esteemed panel up here. You've been amazing. And thank you to all of you.